such a great job covering the Eagles for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Inquirer.com. Jeff McLane joins us. Jeffrey, good morning. How you doing today?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We are now a week into camp. They reported 1 week ago today. We've now seen 4 practices. Today will be Pads Day. Are you fired up for Pads Day? And what are you actually expecting out of the Eagles when they show up to camp today? How physical will it be compared to previous years under Nick Sirianni?
The schedule's, just a little bit different. They did add maybe 1 or 2 more practices. I think next week they have 4 in a row. They didn't have 4 in a row last year. So far, though, it's, it's been pretty much the same. The length of the practices maybe just a little bit longer. They've implemented a new kind of period that Nick talked about yesterday that kind of like it focuses on conditioning. So it seems like that has definitely become something that they've looked at the end of last year, and I've heard about this. This is part of the reason why Ted Rath, the Eagles, head of sports science, no longer with the organization, among other reasons. But they felt like some guys were not in the shape they needed to be late last season, and that played a role in the collapse. So that's something that they're very much focused on. The physicality of it, we'll see. Because this will be the first time that we get to see them in pads. We'll get to see some contact. That's usually the best indicator, early on at least, of how some of these younger guys are going to perform, and certainly in the run game, the running backs, Will Shipley, some of the guys on the offensive line and defensive line, they get a little more freedom to have some contacts with the pads on, and I think that'll give us a better grasp of where some of these guys stand than the earlier practices in shorts and shells.
Jeff, a week in, what is the number one thing you've observed as far as a change in how the players are being taught on the field and coached?
You mean because there's 2 new coordinators?
Yeah, are you watching a different approach to how things are done?
I wouldn't say there's anything that's major that's changed. Again, like I talked about conditioning, I think that is certainly something that you can tell has been changed. In terms of like the coordinators, Vic, schematically, yes, you see changes, not drastic ones with Vic because, again, the 2 defensive coordinators before them basically ran a version of Vic's scheme. And then with Kellen Moore, yes, you definitely see a little more. You're seeing more of the motions, the pre-snap motions, the bunch formations. You're seeing, and occasionally you'll see, Jaylen Herz, or you'll see guys kind of get a little confused because there's a little more on the plate for the wide receivers. But for the most part, no. I think it's really been business as usual for the team, as Nick has said before, and I agree to some extent. Yes, the terminology is changing. Kellen is bringing in some of the stuff from his offense. But again, a lot of the teams, there isn't much difference between what the Eagles run and a lot of the other teams in the NFL run.
I'm going to give you 3 names that I think we all agree need to step up a little bit this season in their own role. And these are 3 guys that had individual issues last year. 1, second half fall off, another injury, and another lack of playing time. Those 3 names are Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, and Nolan Smith. What have you seen out of them so far in the first week of camp?
Yeah, I'll start with Nolan because I wrote about him on my practice notes after yesterday's practice, and he spoke for the first time this training camp. Nolan is good. There's going to be more asked of him. For one, he's moving from the 3rd team to the 2nd team. He's going to be a guy that's out rotated in there. We'll start as a reserve guy. We'll see how well he performs. He's behind Bryce Huff and Josh Sweat. Typically he's been working behind Josh Sweat. Yesterday, for the first time, we saw him working behind Bryce Huff. They'll bounce those guys around. They have to be able to rush from the other side. He's a little bigger. He said he put on 7 pounds of muscle. He had some, not so great moves going up against Fred Johnson and filling for Lane Johnson. He had some good ones. He said he's just working on speed stuff right now. The power stuff will come on again once the pads come on. So I think we'll get better indication of whether that strength that he's added pays dividends when you're rushing up against the likes of Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata. But he's got a lot, to prove. I think, heading into year 2 as a former first rounder, right? Edge rusher, sometimes it takes a little time for these guys to kind of get used to going up against NFL tackles who are, just as quick as getting the spot as some of these guys. So we'll see how he pans out. Jordan Davis, a lot has been written about his conditioning, and he said that he is in better shape. I think he, admitted he stopped short of saying, he's exactly quite where he wants to be, but that's kind of what training camp is for. I wrote about that last week. You watch them up closely. They're early in practices. You see him making plays, and then maybe later practices, or you see him, bending over in his knees. There was one play in which I think they have this new thing where they're, again, to emphasize the conditioning, all the players will run to the touchline, the opposite end zone after they're set. And one time Jordan kind of took off before the play was kind of even finished, just to kind of finish. And then there was another time where they threw out Jaylen Carter and Jordan Davis with the third team. I don't know if it was accidental or, they're rotating guys, or if it was on purpose, because they had to do that again. And Jordan and Jaylen both took off. Jaylen kind of, he sprinted, but Jordan was kind of almost to a walk by the time he got to the pylon. So, it's going to be a little bit of a process for him, but as Vic Fangio said, and Jordan talked about, when he feels conditioned, he's bending his knees, and that's when he is his most effective, because he's a really hard guy to move. Kobe Dean, they've been working on a fair amount of blitzes, and so yesterday I got to see him kind of in that role, and he looked pretty good to me. He's, fully healthy after the foot surgery. He's been running mostly with the second team, but there are times they'll throw him out there with the first team, so I don't think, anyone's really locked into place. It's mostly been Devin White and Oren Burks, who have been with the first team, but, the Kobe obviously started last season as the starter. There's no reason to think that he can't be competing for the spot, because he can play either the Mike or Will. And if you have Devin White as the Mike, you certainly can have the Kobe play the Will.
Do you look at it as a strength, weakness, or potentially an issue that there's so many seemingly moving parts in the Eagles secondary, a lot of unproven talent that they're bouncing around with? How do you review what you've seen and what you think it's going to become?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, because that was certainly a position of issue, both the cornerback, safety, and the slot. Now, they had a lot of injuries, so that played a factor in it as well. But, look, do you want James Bradbury back at outside cornerback? No. So that's an open job. And you brought, had Isaiah Rodgers, who you signed last year when he was suspended. You have Eli Ricks, who you drafted in the fourth round, but you traded a third-rounder to get to him. And you have your first-round draft pick in Quinyon Mitchell. I don't want to forget about Cooper DeJean, because they still think he's a chance to play cornerback, but he's hurt right now. But those are three guys competing for that spot. And, sometimes competition really, that certainly brings out the best in the players. And I think this year, probably more than any year in Nick's 4 years as head coach, there's some unsettled positions. There's more unsettled positions than there have been prior. Say as many as 5, include a third wide receiver in that, or the slot. There's a bunch of positions that are up for grabs. And, the question, though, is do you have, the depth to have that type of competition, or is it really that close? Typically you'll say something, we have 2 good, whatever it may be, positions, and that's a good problem to have. Some people may say, if you have 2 of for one position, that means you don't have the position. But I think that's more of a quarterback kind of phrasing that you'd use than you would for some of these other positions. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Last thing before we let you go, Jeff, is the knee fully healthy for Jaylen Herz? Because by all reports, you guys are down there. He's looking quick. He's moving faster. And was there something more to the knee injury last year that we never really heard about?
Yeah, it's anecdotal. I certainly have noticed it as well. He just looks a little more explosive. I guess a mental thing. Maybe he feels more comfortable in the offense than he did last year, and that affected him. I think it's tough to make that claim, I think, this early in the process. But I was wondering also, too, he had 2 minor kind of ankle cleanouts the 2 previous seasons. Maybe that affected him. The knee injury didn't happen until midway through last season. Mm-hmm. And I thought early on last season, even that first game against the Patriots, he just didn't look maybe as certain in his running, and then maybe that kind of affected how he was moving. it's tough to say for certain. I'd heard even late last season that like the knee wasn't like a huge issue. He had kind of been healthy at that point. Or is it maybe something that's bothering him or not? No, but I was told that it wasn't like a major issue. It was initially an issue, but at the end, I was told that it wasn't pretty much an issue. So I don't think the knee is any problem at this point. I don't know. I think there's probably a combination of factors that may be why he's moving a little bit quicker this training camp.
Jeff, we appreciate it as always, man. We'll be following along all your work on the Inquirer and Inquirer.com, and we can't wait to talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Jeff.